Entropy is a concept that's been created for the field of physics, if I'm not fooling myself. And this concept is going to be extremely useful for interaction between human beings. What entropy is in a formal way, it is a specific relation between two ways to look at the same thing. Those two ways of looking at it are what we call the micro observation and the macro observation. The micro state and the macro state. We've been talking about that at multiple times within this course. In the fields of physics, the classical example to talk about entropy is to take a room such as this one and to say, well, a macro state, a macro setting, a macro combination, a macro dynamic that we can observe in this room could be fixed as how we perceive it as human beings. And a micro state, a micro observation, a micro point of view, not macro but micro, would be the state, the setting of this room at the atoms level, at the molecules level, which we're not seeing at the level of human beings observation, just like this. And the entropy of this room would be a specific link, a specific relationship between those two states, which I'm going to explain to you. So for example, in the macro state, here is a lamp, here is a sofa, here is me, my body, here is a microphone, here is a computer, so on and so on. Look at this lamp. You're seeing a lamp in front of you. I have it in front of myself as well. If I take this lamp and I move it a bit on the left, will this room be exactly in the same way as it was when I started the video? Of course no. This parameter would be different, the lamp, right? If, let's say, I change the color of this shape and I put it blue or white, would the setting of this room be the same as it was at the beginning of the video? No, it would have changed, because one parameter changed. The room is not, the combination of all the parameters is not the same because one parameter changed. Pretty obvious observation. Now it gets interesting when we compare two different states, two different points of view. Let's jump into the micro state. This lamp. If I take one molecule of, I don't know what it is, let's just be intuitive about it. I take a molecule inside, I put it somewhere else in the lamp. And the other molecule, I put it at the place of the first molecule. Will it be the same setting as at the beginning of the video? No, it's not. It would not be the same setting. Something would be different. Okay, we can argue that the molecules are moving all the time or whatever, but this is just an example. We'll apply it to dynamics in social interactions later, so it doesn't need to make complete sense in terms of physics. We're just using it as an analogy. So the setting would not be the same at this micro point of view. But if we zoom out, right, and we go back to the macro point of view, the room in the eyes of a human being, this lamp, if we change the micro setting, we take a molecule here, we put it here, and the other we put it back. Does it change something for us? Do we see the difference? Is the setting the same at the macro level? Yes, it is. Nothing changed. This is still the same lamp at the macro level, but not at the micro level. So we see that it's exactly like with the frames of interpretation and everything we've been talking about. We've been diving deep in this project until now into this concept of relativity, of everything is not in one way, there is no absolute truth. There is different ways to look at it, and depending on how we look at things through which point of view, which frame of interpretation, playing with which creative field, we see that reality reacts in different way and we can be strategic about it. Well, so if it doesn't change anything at the macro level, to change things at the micro level, I guess you can picture where it's going, right? It means that we can change a setting without changing it. Is it paradoxal? In surface, it's paradoxal. But it's because we're changing it at different scales. I'm going to take the example of a Rubik's Cube. I'm coming back. Okay, I'm back with a brand new Rubik's Cube. Alright, maybe I should... Well, you know what? I will try something with this for this Rubik's Cube part. Up. So here we have a Rubik's Cube. Look. If you look at it this way, you look at the Rubik's Cube this way. What is the setting? What is the combination? How is the Rubik's Cube like? What are you seeing? Only white pieces, right? This is a setting. But you're not seeing what's going on under at the more profound levels. At the micro levels of the setting, you only see the macro level of the setting. Let's make the analogy with interpretation. If someone tells you, shut the fuck up, that's what you see. Now, what does it mean? If it's your best friend who says that, well, most likely it's a joke. He's just teasing you. Depending on how it's being used, but you get the point, you get where I'm going. So it would be a joke. So if you look at the micro dynamics of this surface, shut the fuck up. What does it mean? You look under. Ah, okay. Shut the fuck up. It means he's teasing me. He's joking. Right. However, it could be different. Shut the fuck up. Now you look. Oh, it's a stranger who says that at me. He looks pretty angry. Oh, he's not joking. He's angry. Same surface. Things are different. Well, let's say that the second level would be his facial expression, his intonation. And the last level would be how you really interpret all of that all together, right? You get the idea? So there is the macro level and the micro levels behind. And we can change the micro levels without changing the macro level. That's going to be very powerful. Ok, je veux aller où avec ça, moi? Now look at that Rubik's Cube. How many different micro combination, micro settings can there be in this Rubik's Cube while this macro setting stays the same? Well, so there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, we can go even further. Look, something like maybe up, 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 up. I don't know, maybe yeah, and okay. So we mix it up even more. So now new combination, and we can play on and on again like this. There is a lot of different combinations, settings that are possible at the micro level, while keeping the macro level the same. The number of those combinations that are possible at the micro level while keeping the macro level the same will be what we call the level of entropy of this system. The level of entropy of this Rubik's Cube seen as these macro and micro levels. In the room here, the same. How many micro combinations at the level of atoms are possible while keeping this room the same at the macro level? It would be the level of entropy. Well, it's exponential, so we put a logarithm before, but it's more about formal stuff. Let's just think about it in terms of how much combination there is that keep the macro level the same. In interaction, it would be how many ways is there that you can interpret the same event. That would be the level of entropy. Now you can get a little bit of a sense of where all of this is going. You're talking to someone. You're doing something which can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. It means it has a high level of entropy. Well, so in terms of probability, how probable is it that they are actually going to misinterpret wrongly your intentions, what you mean or whatever? Basic example. You approach a woman and you say, hey, where is the subway? You approach a woman and you talk about random shit. You do an indirect approach, indirect opener, which is about not showing interest and more talking about stupid shit like, where did you buy this or whatever. How likely is she to misinterpret it? How likely is she to misinterpret what's going on? And actually, it's not even a good example because the level of entropy in this situation is pretty low. The more likely interpretation is that you actually just want to know why she buys it. A high level entropy approach would be something like coming in front of someone and say something like, hey, how are you going? For example, very high level of entropy. this approach. The person will not know how to interpret it. The level of entropy of this approach, which means the number of different ways it can be interpreted, will depend on the first lower levels of what you're doing. Your facial expression, your intonations, whatever. And this is what you'll be playing with. For example, if you do that with the facial expression and the physical levels of escalation that we've been talking about, most likely, if it's a woman, she will understand what's going on. She will understand how to interpret it. If you do it in a very friendly way, without any levels of escalation, most likely she will think that you want to ask for an association, you want money, maybe you're a promoter. So what you say will have a very high level of entropy. And then what you do while you're saying it, what comes around, will direct this entropy in one or another direction. But it's still going to be misleading and it's going to create a lot of problematics. Playing with entropy will be something that you want to do at higher levels of dating skill, social skill of approaching people. You would actually like to proactively create a kind of high level of entropy. And we'll talk about later why you want that. For example, it would be good to approach a woman like this, how are you doing? In a way that she doesn't know how to interpret it, but you still do it in a way that she kind of hope that you're here for her because you're interested. She kind of hope it, but she doesn't know, she's not sure. That's the kind of thing that you want to do. It would be like what we could call an advanced technique. We'll talk about that later. But if you're not there, then entropy is always going to fuck you up. Always. So now, why do we need to talk about it? Why are we even talking about entropy now? Isn't it just one more concept here, which is not that important and that has nothing to do here? No, actually it's very central. It's very important for what we're doing. It's the last piece of the puzzle. This is the piece that is going to tie everything together. Actually, what we're going to see right now is that almost every single technique that's being used in the pickup community, in the dating community, in the artistry of approaching people and especially women, every single technique almost that's been created fall into entropy. That's playing with entropy. Why is that? Why is there this dynamic that we can observe that all those techniques, they are extensions of entropy? Well, because we're talking about social interaction, human being and human being, so everything that's happening would happen within the limits of how the mind is constructed, right? Human beings with human beings. This is one brain interacting with another brain. So everything that happens is going to be limited by the very structure of this brain. Makes complete sense. And what is the function of the mind? What is the basic function of the mind? We talked about it. Creating a high-level complexity, psychological ecosystem. But if we want to see it from a more physical point of view, is to reduce entropy. That's the reason why the mind is made. That's the purpose of the mind. The mind is an instrument, it's a tool to reduce entropy. To be like, okay, there is a lot of way to interpret all the things that are going on. I'm going to put labels on it. I'm going to create sets from it. I'm going to construct a psychological ecosystem. This is completely chaotic. There is a lot of information. Let's reduce the entropy so that I know how to interpret everything and put everything in little boxes. And this is an ongoing process, indefinite process. But what we can observe from that is that all the psychological bias that the techniques of influence are using to influence people, all the triggers of pleasure, all the triggers of attention, of captivation, whatever. This is entropic triggers. It's what's going on. Every single influence technique is about playing with the entropy that is being exposed to the brain of the other person so that their brain reacts to this variation of entropy and wants to fix it in a way or another. And this is why it's so important to talk about it, because it will help us to bring everything we've seen together into the same box, into the box of entropy. The interpretations, the techniques of influence, the harmonizing of your psyche and her psyche, we will be able to put everything together in the same box through this concept of entropy. This is why it's important to talk about it now. This is the piece that will tie all the puzzle together. So this is why we're talking about entropy now. We're going to play with the different techniques that you might already know so that you get the point of all of it. Look at it this way. We've been talking about value containers, happiness and suffering containers. But it has to be interpreted, right? Makes sense, it has to be interpreted. The same thing, the same event, depending on how it's interpreted, will be either a happiness container, either a suffering container, right? So what we see is that if we had to draw like a gauge, okay, let's do it like this. Hop, a gauge of, let's say, 100% happiness, 100% suffering, and here in the middle it will be, I don't know, neutral. You get the idea. No need to be too formal about it. And something happens. Someone comes to you and say, hey, do you want $100? Just like this, I give you $100. Well, is it going to generate happiness or suffering? What's going to happen? Well, there is multiple level of psychological event happening. So this is the event. I'm going to write it like this. Hop, $100 baby. That's what they ask for. That's what they give you. You want $100? But now you have to interpret it. There is a lot of entropy in this situation. What's going on? So there is like a range of possibility. Okay, within this entropy, there is like a high probability that this is going to make me happy if it's true. But if it's a scam, then suffering container, you see? So it will go like this, probability of being a very high happiness container and suffering container. Let's take another example. Same circumstance. Someone comes to you in the street and is just like, hey man, your style is incredible, just have a good day. And he walks away. You're like, what the fuck? What the fuck just happened? But even if it's completely what the fuck and it might never have happened, you might think this guy is crazy, there is not that much entropy. Well, depends on how deep we go about it. If you really want to think about how did he end up doing that, now there might be a lot of entropy, but if we stay at more shallow level of investigation, for just about what did he really mean by that? Is it a scam? Is there an agenda behind? Is it an attempt of manipulating me or whatever? You're like, well, he left, I'm never going to see him again. Well, maybe he's just doing a challenge, maybe he's just nice, I don't know, but it's pretty obvious that he really meant what he says, isn't it? In this situation, let's write it like this. It's a guy with a smile. Okay, he looks stupid in my drawing, but you get the point. Most likely it's going to be here. It's not going to be, there's not much entropy going into the negative part of the spectrum of happiness. So this is an event that still has entropy, but most of this entropy will be focused only on positive, right? So if we have to compare those two situations, which of those two situations is going to generate the most happiness? The second one or the first one? Look at the sketch. Complicated question. First one, at least you're almost sure that it's good in any way. The second one, you're not sure, it can be bad. Maybe this person is going to harass you or you don't know. He's in front of you waiting to give you $100. However, the potentiality for a lot of happiness coming out of it is higher. Like the best interpretation of the guy giving $100, which would be that he's just generous and he just gives you for real. The best interpretation of that is way better than the best interpretation of the second one. However, the worst interpretation of the second one is as well way better than the worst interpretation of the guy who gives $100. So you see this point, you see the dynamics that are going here. And this is what's going to be all the psychological tools of influence is about. For example, curiosity, making people curious. That kind of comes from it, the concept of open loop. Open loop is, for example, I'm your friend, I say, hey, you know what happened yesterday with Amanda? Let's say we know Amanda. It'd be like, what happened with Amanda? That's an open loop. I'm baiting you to ask for more. I'm saying something which has kind of a lot of entropy. You don't know how to interpret it, but you sense that there is a high potential. So you want to find out, am I going to get a lot of positive from it or a lot of negative? I don't know. So this is what would create the ability to make people want to know more. For example, this is what we could call open influence technique. Well, as you see, we can reduce it to entropy. And the drive of every human being to reduce entropy. Now, something else. Captivation. Creating captivation. Captivating people. For example, using open loop in the context of creating sexual arousal. For example, either may it be by text message or may it be in face-to-face. You're with a woman, with a girl, you're talking. It starts to get more sexual and you verbally escalate in a way that leaves open loops. She doesn't really know how to interpret what's coming. For example, a very basic example, you're like, if only you know what I have in my mind right now. Not so huge entropy, she knows it's about sex. And however, you can do what we will call a push-pull, which is about actually then being like, I think about going to buy a cheeseburger with you now. She'd be like, ah, fuck, he got me. Push-pull. Okay, that's another technique. But you see, it's as well playing with entropy. Every technique is playing with entropy. But well, the first one, for creating sexual arousal. Why would you do that with sexual escalation? Well, because by playing with entropy, you will trigger her mind to be captivated, to focus, to harmonize around what's going on. So actually what you're doing is that you're helping her to harmonize her mind around what's going on. You're actually being a game partner with her, as if you're on the same team, as if you're on the same team. You both want to get sexually aroused, but because you're not fucking Buddha, as we said in the entire course, it's difficult to be focused and harmonize your psychology by yourself. You might be stressed or whatever. So you will use technique to help each other. She will use open loops. For example, she's going to give you a blowjob. She goes down, she takes your dick. And instead of going straight forward to giving the blowjob, she will take a bit of her time. And you don't really know when she will do it. You know she will do it, but you don't know when. And actually this situation is way more exciting than if she goes straight to it. Why? Entropy. She's triggering the mechanisms of your brain to completely harmonize around what's going on. As if you're watching a movie, cinema, when there is suspense. The music stops. Entropy, you know something is going to happen, but you don't know exactly what. It triggers your mind to be completely focused and harmonized around investigating what's going to happen. What's the point of it? The point is pleasure. We want that. We want to have our psychology harmonized. So this is collaborative button pushing. It's like I push the button of your brain so that it gets harmonized, and you do the same for me. So we help each other. It's like a game, right? What is a push-pull? Push-pull is the same thing as we've done before. Whoa, you're so fucking beautiful. I have to present you to a friend of me. That's a push-pull. You make someone believe that there is a low level of entropy. You kind of make them believe that even if there is entropy, they think it's limited to a certain range, and then you break it. Then you do something that shows them that the real interpretation was not even within the boundaries of what they expected. Push-pull. The common way to do it is to play with positive and negative. For example, you say a compliment and then you say something bad. It's a way to tease, right? Push-pull. What's going on? It's a kind of way to do humor as well. What is humor? We've talked about it. It's also a kind of entropic phenomenon. We can put everything in this field, playing with the entropy of the interpretations. Okay, so now let's make just a short list so that you have it fresh in your mind of the different kind of thing you could do to play with this entropy. Well, let's make this same gauge again. Up. Let's say that this kind of pattern of entropy would be what we call positive entropy, which means that the person is not sure how to interpret it, but they don't know exactly what it is, but they know what are the limitations of the possibility. For example, you're eating something and you're like, wow, that's very... Now they don't know what you're going to say. There is a bit of entropy, but they are expecting it to be positive. Other one would be negative entropy. You're eating something and you're like, wow, it's like they don't know what you're going to say, but they expect it to be negative. Now, mixed entropy. You eat something with your friend and you're like, it's here they don't know what to expect. Will it be positive? Will it be negative? mixed entropy? Well, as we've seen in the conversation masterclass, instead of learning techniques, like you take a pickup artistry project and you learn, okay, pricing frame, push-pulls, bouncing, baby step, whatever technique you learn, right? Instead of doing that, which would be the equivalent for conversation, to do small talk without really knowing where you're going, here by focusing on these patterns of entropy, you will be able to come up by yourself with those techniques in the same way than with the conversation masterclass. When we've explained the logic of the maps of identity, we've explained that then the questions, they will come by themselves to your mind because you will want to explore and investigate those maps of identity and those deeper levels. And to do that, you will naturally think, well, I have to ask questions, and the questions will come in the right order with a purpose. Here, in the same way, if you have this map of entropy in your head and you're interpreting every situation, every trigger that you can use as generating pleasure for the other person by triggering the drive of their brain to investigate entropy, then all of those techniques, they will come by themselves and with the right frame. Not because of not with ego, like, okay, I want to tease her so that they chase me because if she chases me, then I'm the boss or whatever. No, you will understand the collaborative drive that is behind. So not only you will come up with the techniques by yourself, but moreover, you will come up with the techniques at the right moment, in the right context, without spending years like I see everywhere of guys doing pickup, guys approaching women, applying techniques, and actually doing very inefficient, bad stuff because they apply techniques and they apply them well. But at the micro level, they apply the technique well, but isolated. It doesn't make sense in the larger context or where the entire interaction is going. And they need to rely on very fixed structure of interaction and routines and things like this, which I think doesn't make sense because it's just a way to get them to emulate an interaction that works not only at micro levels but also at the macro level of the interaction. But this is one way of emulating, so this is very limited, this is very rigid, it lacks a lot. That's not optimal, that's not optimized. Now, if you want to use entropy to trigger the brain of people for pleasure, what you have to consider is that no matter what is the combination of entropy that you're doing, may it be exposing people to positive entropy, mixed entropy, negative entropy, you always want to have positive inside. If there is only negative entropy, people will run away from it real fast, even more than if they know it's negative and they know exactly how it's negative. In this case, at least they can deal with it. At least it's not going to make their mind spiral down. The negative will be exponential in the mind of people when it's negative entropy. So not only it's negative, but they don't know how it's going to manifest in the negative spectrum. That's the worst that can happen. You never want negative entropy. If ever something negative has to happen, well, make the interpretation of it very clear. Because if there is negative with entropy, so they don't even know what exactly is negative, but they know it's negative, that's really fucked up. So this one you never want, negative entropy. Unless you're doing it for humor, which would be extremely good. In this case it works, but it will be in multiple steps. It would be push-pull. For example, you eat the food, someone cooked the food for you. Someone cooked for you. They are attached to how you will think it is. You eat it, wow, that's amazing. So at first they think there is negative entropy, they feel bad. And then soon enough you show them it's a joke. And now they're like, fucker, you got me. And now they enjoy, and now you can go back to positive. Shit, it's really good. How did you do that? What did you put inside? Whoa, thank you so much. It's really amazing. That's how you can actually really captivate at a very advanced kind of dark level, but which is still collaborative. It's by playing with this negative entropy, then showing that they misinterpreted the negative entropy. Like, I thought it was negative entropy, but actually it was mixed entropy, but I didn't notice. and the solution of the mixed entropy was in the positive, so I was actually completely missing it. That's what's going on. Positive entropy is amazing, but not so much, because remember, look, we want, as always, to optimize everything. We want everything to be optimized, right? Look, there is the value containers that we've been talking about. Sexual arousal, ego, social, right? The thing is that with time, the psychological ecosystem gets polarized around different things with time. For example, sometimes the one which really will be polarized will be the ego. Sometimes the one that will really be polarized will be sexual arousal. Sometimes the one that will be very polarized will be humor. Basically, it will alternate between those three ones. So when you will, let's say you're in a club, you will approach a woman, right? Most likely her psychology will have a hierarchy of priorities, of polarized sets. At this moment, you don't really know which one is going to be. You can observe it, but in general, let's just find the global rule so that it works for any combination. You will approach her. What if what's being polarized right now for her is the idea of flirting, having a man being aroused by him, flirting with him, and you're just doing humor? Well, it's not really going to feed her happiness so much, because at this moment, unless you proactively unpolarize her, for example with breaking patterns, you can do that, but it's pretty advanced. Unless you do that, well, you're not feeding the value containers that she's being polarized in at this moment. If she's at a moment where the value container that she wants the most is humor, and you come in a very sexual way, unless you're combining this sexual behavior with humor, well, that's going to fuck up the value containers that's polarized in her mind. That's not what she wants. That's not aligned. Well, I think you got it already. It means you are not being harmonized with her. There's no harmony. What's polarized in her mind is this set, and what's polarized in your mind is this set, or at least that's what she thinks. But what you're giving to her is something different than what's being polarized in her mind. So there's a lack of harmony. What does it create? Conflict. Like when you have internal conflict, it creates not internal conflict, but interaction conflict. I don't know how we can call it. And this is how every conflict between human beings happen. You have a conflict with someone of your family. Let's say, I don't know, your sister, she wanted to have your attention for something and you didn't give it. You created a conflict in her mind, but because her mind and your mind, as we explained, they tend to merge together. What her mind wants is part of what your mind wants, because you want things from her, but she will give to you only if you're giving to her what she wants. You get the idea. For example, you want her to not get mad at you, to not get angry. But if you give her things that will create conflict in her mind, then she will get angry. So in order to satisfy the part of your mind that wants her to not be angry, you have to harmonize it with what she wants, right? To get the idea. So this is the same pattern happening. For this sake, in order to be completely versatile, in order to be completely like a truck who can drive on every type of road, you can ski on the water, you can fly, you can be on the mountains, you can drive everywhere. You want to always optimize everything. And even for yourself, it's like controlled circulation, controlled psychological circulation. You want a lot of complexity. So you want to train yourself to always have everything all together. So when you will interact with people, you want to trigger all buttons. It's as if you're driving a plane, you're a driver, a pilot of a plane, and there's a lot of buttons, but you're only pushing 3 buttons, whereas there is 1,000. Well, that might be not a very good metaphor, but you get the point. It's not very optimized. You could get into more complexity. Your brain even will start to get into conflict with himself if you don't do it. He'll be like, well, I see that there is complexity to be gained, but it's not happening. Conflict will happen inside you. You want always to be optimizing all the buttons, touching everything. And for example, if you're only doing positive entropy, or if you're only in the positive scale of emotions, well, then let's say you come upon someone who is in the Spartan state or in the conflictual state. What's going on? Actually, he will love you to play with negative push-pull entropy. To be like, talk to him like if you want to conflict with him, so negative entropy, expect you to conflict, and then smiling and being like, yeah, no, I'm kidding. And so it was a joke. And so he's like, oh, so not only you gave me what I wanted, which was this part of conflict, but over that, you're also making me laugh. Oh, God, I love you. This is why at school, that's what I've been observing at school, the cool kids, the cool teenager, they all have this polarity. They always have this polarity of teasing each other and playing with this negative entropy, like talking shit on the other, then the other is talking shit back, and then being like, yeah, bro, I love you, and switching back to positive. Is because that's what they are really being polarized into at that stage. In clubs, it will happen a lot with women actually. Because in the club, in the parties, women have so much attention. It gets them into a state where they're feeling so, their ego is so inflated. Their ego is so protected. Because no matter what happens, they will get the validation no matter what. Because they have all the men looking at them, whatever. That at this point, it's going to, at some point, make them feel like the cool kids at school, the cool teenagers. It will happen a lot in the clubs. And so, what happens at this moment in this ego inflation is that they will get polarized into this drive for negative entropy. So you will still want to play with it, but in a way that then you make a push-pull and you go back to positive, always. So this is a specific case, negative entropy. You still want to play with it, but you want to go back to positive after. So basically the best thing you can do is to be, let's say, 70% of the time in positive entropy. You're not going to be fixed with it, but so you get the big picture. 70% of the time, and actually it depends on people, it depends on what they are polarized into, it will depend. But the global case is 70% positive entropy, 25% mixed entropy, which then happens to be revealed as positive, but they couldn't know, and 5% of the time negative entropy, which they believe is negative entropy, but then you reveal it to be positive, and then they realize that it was mixed entropy that then reveals to be positive, okay? So it's like you're in the positive, and you go a bit down and you go back up, and you go a bit down and you go back up, and you stay up, and then you go down and you go back up. Every time you go down, you want to go back up. It's like a way to, when you go down, it's as if it triggers their brain to be captivated, but if you pull it too much, it's going to generate negative. So you want to fast go back to positive so that it doesn't have time to sink into their brain and to create negative neighborhoods. You don't want their mind to have the time to fall into negative momentum, negative neighborhood. They would hate you for that.